weaponizing distance and understanding the root of the word rich. We're going to go through the fourth chapter of Pirkei Avot, but focusing in on the first point. And I'm going to use it as an opportunity to branch out into other points from Rav Hirsch. So without further ado, welcome. I'm Simi Lerner, and this is the Judaism From Within podcast, the podcast dedicated to drawing Rav Hirsch's perspective to the modern world, seeing that sort of timeless wisdom and how it approaches the Torah and our lives. One key idea to remember with Rav Hirsch is that you cannot separate morality from Judaism. You can't separate morality from God, because being spiritual requires a lived subject. If you are not living in this world, if you're not interacting with this world, you can't be spiritual, because spiritual, at least for Rav Hirsch, has a moral element to it. And that makes sense in the context of our discussion. There are 4 points that this, Ben Zoma opens up with, and they're classic, but I really want to draw in on them, because what Rav Hirsch does with them I think is quite cool, but also quite revolutionary, at least in his time perhaps. So we've got the 4 points. And just always as a caveat, yes, the rest of the commentary on Pirkei Avot is very beautiful, but I felt a need to focus in on this. And then next week we'll go to chapter 5. But what are we doing here? The 4 principles, the idea is who is a wise person, who is a wealthy person, who is an honored person, and who is a strong person. And each one of these, Ben Zoma gives us an answer. Who is knowledgeable? Person who learns from other people. Who is strong? Who overcomes his inner inclination. Who is rich? A person who is satisfied. And who is honored? He who honors other people. And I want to go through Rav Hirsch's angle on each one of these. The first one, and then we'll sort of dig into it a little bit. The first one, wisdom. Now, this is a beautiful feedback loop that Rav Hirsch uses often, and that's why I opened up with spirituality. Holiness is the need for a feedback loop. You have, in Chorev, Rav Hirsch describes the importance of holiness as being a feedback cycle, that you have to look at the world, you have to look at the Torah, allow it to change you, and through the act of changing you, the study, the engagement, you become a new person, and then that new person looks at the Torah again, and then you have this sort of infinite feedback cycle where you become greater, closer to God, more godlike through your engagement in the world and Torah. Now, why is this so key? Because you can't have one without the other. Rav Hirsch points out the importance of wisdom is understanding the world, but more importantly, when you understand the world, you realize that your knowledge is only one slice of the world, and that brings humility. And through that humility, you are able to learn. So you have a moral principle that is a prerequisite for learning more, that being humility. But only a humble person, it reminds me of something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's one of those concepts that once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. They find that people who know a little bit about a subject are profoundly arrogant and overestimate their knowledge about the subject. But people who know a lot about a subject recognize how little they know and thereby are more humble. So humility is a prerequisite. But remember, humility is a prerequisite to any spiritual journey. Any journey requires that you're not there yet. There is a distance from where you are to where you need to go. And Rav Hirsch's understanding of spirituality and wisdom are intertwined in this case, because a humble person is able to look at the world. A humble person is able to use the Torah as his guide for that world. And thereby, you can get that feedback loop that I mentioned in reference to Chorev, his work where he discusses different mitzvahs in the Torah and their meaning. To become holy requires this relationship between the world and you and the Torah. And that interaction, its prerequisite is humility, because you have to recognize you're not there yet. So we have the prerequisite, we have humility, and the appreciation that your knowledge, however great it may be, is but a slice of the overall knowledge. And that, once again, that awareness of that truth brings out humility naturally, and then that humble person can learn from everyone, and that humble person can engage in becoming holy. That's the first. The second one, who is strong, who can overcome that inner inclination. Now, for this point, I want to jump to later on in Pirkei Avot, where he discusses that you shouldn't, You shouldn't disregard a small mitzvah or ignore a small avera, a small sin, a small avera. What's the big deal? Who really cares? He says, no, because a small mitzvah holds the seed of its reward. And we mentioned this previously. And an avera holds the seed for its own punishment. And this is a key idea, especially when it comes to that second principle of strength. Who overcomes his inner inclination. Once again, the externality of all these concepts. In the world we live in today, both your wisdom is, how do you put it? It's an idea that Rav Hirsch brings later in Pirkei Avot, the idea that we have people who use wisdom as a crown, or wisdom as a hatchet. The idea that wisdom will be a way of you getting things. We have that in today's day and age. People love to post their little whimsical ideas on their statuses as a way of let's call it philosophically flexing. But once again, you need other people's recognition of that to, oh, you're a thought leader, you're a influencer. It should come from an internal state. And you know the type of people that is, the type of people who are humble when they interact with someone else, meaning the humility, or the wisdom in this case, comes from an internal state rather than an external state. Same when it comes to strength, overcoming the inner self rather than overcoming something external, because you can have the strongest person in the world, but internally they're fragile. So just to circle back, I drew us back to this idea of mitzvah and avera. What am I doing there? Rav Hirsch explains that when it comes to a small mitzvah, what are you doing? You're experiencing reward, but more than that, you're experiencing reinforcement. You're reinforcing not only the reward, that you are in line with your higher purpose. People think reward, once again, has to be this external cookie that you'll get at the end at times. You may get that cookie, but that's not your motivation. Your motivation is because you're living your life in line with a higher goal. That's reward. You're that type of person. But there's more than that. What does it mean another mitzvah will come from it? It's because you reinforce those pathways. Now, Rav Hirsch didn't use the language of neural pathways, but he does talk about reinforcing. You reinforce that you are the type of person who does good. But the inversion is true as well. A sin is a failure. A sin is a punishment because you didn't live up to your values. You are the type of person who failed when that temptation came along. That doesn't mean you give up, but it means you recognize that there's a punishment there. And the danger is when you've led yourself to a state where you don't feel that punishment because you're already, let's call it, blind to it. You reinforce the weakness. First time you do it, second time you do it, third time you do it. The idea we brought previously about the relationship. No, we didn't bring it here. I taught it in a different class when I spoke about King David and the idea that the way Nathan, the prophet, describes the shepherd and the rich man in his parable to David. And Chazal look at that as being the stages of the Yetzer Hara to the point he's like living in your house. The idea being here that you are reinforcing weakness. When you reinforce weakness, you become a weaker person. And there is no greater sin than there is no greater punishment than being weak and being aware of your weakness. So we have our first two. Wisdom and strength, now wealth. Now, the point Rav Hirsch brings here is beautiful. He brings it in another context when it comes to honor, that there's no saturation point. That's his words precisely, when it comes to honor. Honor has no limit, because by definition, you can always be known more. You can always expand yourself more. Money is very similar. Money is an abstraction. You can't have an abstraction. Definitionally, an abstraction is infinite. And Rav Hirsch points money is how you buy things, how you get your joy, but if your joy is on your wealth, you will never be happy. And he brings the parallel to the German, Reichte, which means to reach. That's rich. You've reached it. Now, what they meant when they came up with that word, I don't know, but from Rav Hirsch's standpoint, it's the person who's reached an understanding, if you will, that you've reached what you need. You are content with your lot. But how do you get content with your lot? What's the reframing you do to be content with your lot? The reframing you do from a Hirsch's standpoint is recognize that your wealth is a tool. You have a mission to live up here. You have a responsibility to live up here. And you are given tools to accomplish that goal. Now, this doesn't get rid of wanting things. Nobody's that naive. But once again, any break you can do in your, I think they call it parasitic processing. When you've got an idea in your mind and it feeds off itself. Money is often like that. We want money because we want money. We justify it in many different ways, but often a break, a reframe, can stop that cycle, can allow us to not be narrow in our perspective on the world and our wealth. Look at the world through the language of mission. Now, this doesn't stop you wanting nice things, but it means when you want something, you ask a question. And even if you don't every time, if 1% of the time you ask this question, it makes you focus on mission. It broadens your perspective. You're not narrowly focused. You're broadened your perspective to, okay, Why do I want this? Once again, that focus on the internal locus of control, because that's where strength comes from, and wealth comes from, as Rav Hirsch draws into the word once again, reich, to reach something. Because if you feel that you've truly reached it, well, then you'll be content. You'll be wealthy. Rather than, as Rav Hirsch puts it, the person who is chasing money, why do they feel poor? Because there is an infinite gulf between what they have and what they think they need or deserve. And that infinite gulf is an abstraction that cannot be filled. And in terms of honor, he just points out something that I think is very obvious, but I didn't really frame it like this. I call it weaponizing distance. When people are looking for honor, they distance themselves from people. If you think about it, the person who wants honor, they move themselves away from people. They move themselves away from people as a way of isolating themselves, as seeing themselves as different or above. The Mishnah's advice is the complete opposite of that. In a similar way, you don't have control of the honor you get when you distance yourself from people. You might feel separated, but the way to truly be a respected person is when people feel you respect them. And I think it's more sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that when you respect other people and you give other people their due, you let other people speak, you let other people exist and you respect them, you naturally come across as a wider, greater person. And those are the type of people we respect. So it's not the type of person who, I think classically this is phrased as, don't chase honor, but honor other people. And I think the problem with that is it's using the wrong, let's call it, mental structures. It's looking at the world through, I think it was Eric Fromm who called it the having mode and the being mode. It's using the language of having. People are like, oh, I want honor. This is a tick box to get honor. Honor other people, and then I'll get honor. Rav Hirsch is reframing it. You become a certain type of person, using the language of being. You are that type of person, not the person who's chasing money, but you are the type of person who gets honored because you respect other people. It isn't a mechanistic, I gain honor, but it is a result of being a certain type of person. But how do you go on the journey of becoming that certain type of person? You honor other people. So let us recap. We had our 4 points: knowledge and the feedback loop of morality, connection to the world, looking at the Torah, and that feedback loop begins with humility, but then you become a wise person because you are able to learn from other people, because you have that prerequisite, which is humility, which opens the door for you to become a servant of God in this world, because you are able to go on that positive feedback cycle we mentioned from Chorev. Second of all, the idea of strength and the idea of being internally strong. And we laid that out with one mitzvah leads to another mitzvah and one avera leads to another avera. No mitzvah is too small. No avera is too small for you to think it's okay to do it. Then we spoke about wealth and reich, to reach. When you feel that you've reached it, you are internally wealthy because you have the tools for your mission. And then lastly, we spoke about the idea of honor and the having mode and the being mode. This isn't a way of achieving honor in a sort of like having materialistic way, but no, you are becoming a certain type of person, and a certain type of person, honor follows them. As always, thank you for your time and have a wonderful week.